All right. Well, good morning. It looks like we have everybody kind of flowing in. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and thanks for your patience. We had a few technical difficulties. I mean, what would it be if we didn't have a few technical difficulties? So thank you for your patience. And hopefully you got in some more sips of coffee and got to relax, wake up a little bit. We greatly appreciate you being here to the Soil Health Sit Down, our first one for the winter of 21-22. My name is Jody Prout with the Palouse Conservation District. I am joined by my colleague, Elizabeth Sebo, who will be monitoring the chat and coordinating behind the scenes this morning. We are very excited to bring you this presentation, and we're looking forward to spending the next hour here with you. So for the remainder of the presentation, I'd like to ask you to please keep your microphone muted. And then I would encourage you to keep your camera on if you're comfortable doing so. And however, if you run into any bandwidth issues, please turn off your camera at that time. The camera and microphone controls can be found on the bottom left of your screen. If you have any questions during the presentation, you're welcome to drop them into the chat, or you can hold them until the end when you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask them directly to our speakers. This talk is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on our website and YouTube page, hopefully later today. We'll be also raffling off some swag from the Conservation District at the end of this talk, so stick around to be eligible. Since we're running low on time, I'm going to move forward through our presentation here. Just a quick overview of the Conservation District. We're a local government agency that engages with landowners on a voluntary basis to keep our air, water, soil, and habitats healthy. We are one of 4 conservation districts located in Whitman County, as you can see on the map, with a staff of 20, 4 AmeriCorps members, 1 Veteran Conservation Corps member, and then a 5-member volunteer board. A few brief announcements before we get into the presentation. We will be hosting our annual meeting via Zoom on January 18th at 6 p.m. You can come here from our staff and board on the conservation highlights from 2001, and then our plans for helping the community meet conservation goals in 2022. Visit our website for more information on how to register. Additionally, another event that might be of interest, we'll be working with the Washington State Department of Agriculture to host a virtual pesticide education event at the end of February. Participants will receive 2 education credits. More information will be posted on our website after the new year if you are interested in receiving credits. Now on to the main event. I'm excited to introduce our speakers this morning. Dr. Lynne Carpenter Boggs is a soil scientist and professor in the Department of Crop and Soil Sciences at Washington State University. Dr. Carpenter Boggs has presented with us previously. This spring, she gave a presentation on composting on the farm and garden as part of our conservation talk series. So we're excited to have her back to share her research. She teaches courses on sustainable soil management and organic agriculture. Her research includes carbon footprints of agriculture, nitrogen fixation, compost teas, crop and livestock integration, and other aspects of biointensive agriculture. She is joined today by Erin Appleby, who is a Ph.D. candidate in crop sciences at WSU, specializing in organic pesticides. Erin received his Bachelor's of Science in Organic Ag from Washington State University and is a graduate of WSU with a Master's of Science in Crop Science, specializing in organic pesticides. And he's currently working on organic herbicides in a research capacity. He's been working on organic herbicides in a research capacity since 2016 and is a certified crop advisor. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I will turn it over to Dr. Carpenter Boggs.
Hey, thank you, Jody. And so can you see my screen now?
We cannot yet, no.
Okay, I got now.
There it comes, yep.
Okay. And I'm clicking slideshow, but okay, there we go. So good morning, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but thank you for joining us to talk about organic herbicides. So as Jody mentioned, Aaron has been studying these organic herbicides for several years, and now he's a graduate student studying with me and some others in the Department of Crop and Soil Sciences here in Pullman. And so the work that primarily Aaron's going to be talking about is what he's been doing primarily in an orchard system for several years. And then we're also beginning some work in local field crops. And so we'll talk about how they might be appropriate to use in Palouse systems. So as Jody has already introduced us, I'm a professor of soil science and sustainable agriculture, and Aaron is a Ph.D. crop science candidate.
And
So,
Lynn, sorry to interrupt. We have lost visual of your screen. I don't know if that's the case for other people, but
yeah, it looks like the screen is still sharing, but maybe not coming across correctly.
yeah, okay.
Just restart this.
Ah, there it is. Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Lynn.
First, we want to just mention that every technology that you use, and these organic herbicides would be no exception, they're all part of your integrated weed management plan. So all of you, I'm sure, are using many different types of controls for weed management. As we know, weeds are just a continual continual issue in agriculture. So these organic herbicides may have a part to play, but they're likely to not fully replace other things that you're doing. So they may include preventive controls, which everyone should be doing, like reducing seed sets, reducing seed movement around the farm, cultural and mechanical means like providing competition from crops, some mechanical tools, of course, like tillage, even conservation till. Biological tools, we don't really have a lot that are very effective on agricultural scale. And so even though these are organic chemicals, they are still part of the chemical component of a weed management plan. But for this presentation, there we go. Okay. So Aaron's going to introduce you to some of the chemicals that he's been using and how they act.
All right, well, hello everybody, good morning. Like everybody said, my name is Aaron Appleby, and I'll be talking to you today about some organic herbicides. Both the Washington State Department of Agriculture and the Organic Materials Review Institute are responsible for registering herbicides for use in certified organic production. In order for herbicides to be registered for use in certified organic production, they may not contain any prohibited substances such as synthetic chemicals or dangerous natural substances such as nicotine. Most organic registered herbicides contain essential oil or fatty acid active ingredients. Next slide, please. Essential oils are complex mixtures of 10 to several hundred volatile compounds obtained through mechanical pressing or steam distillation. Two of the herbicides we tested with essential oil active ingredients were Avenger, with the active ingredient D-limonene, obtained from cold pressing citrus peels, and Weed Zap, with an active ingredient of clove and cinnamon oil, obtained from steam distillation of plant parts. When we began researching organic registered herbicides 5 years ago, the mode of action for essential oils was unknown, but generally thought to disrupt plasma membranes, leading to cell leakage and desiccation. We now understand that that mode of action is just one of many different mode of actions associated with essential oil components, each of which can have one or more biological activities. I'm not going to go over all of the essential oil mode of actions, but rather I would like this slide to illustrate just how complex the modes of action can be for essential oils and their constituents. Fatty acids have a similar structure to phospholipids that make up plasma membranes and are composed of a polar acidic head and a nonpolar carbon tail. Two of the herbicides we tested with fatty acid active ingredients were Suppress, with the active ingredients capric and caprylic acid, the 8 and 10 carbon chain fatty acids obtained from palm and coconut oils, and All Down, with the active ingredients acetic acid, otherwise known as vinegar, and citric acid. Both acetic acid and citric acid deprotonate when entering plant cells, releasing positively charged hydrogen ions called protons from the acid head. This increased level of protons prevents the production of energy by reducing the proton gradient needed for ATP production. This causes a backup of excited electrons involved in photosynthesis, generating reactive oxygen species that degrade proteins, causing plasma membranes to become unstable, leading to leakage and causing cell death through desiccation. Now there's a bit of some movement in this slide real quick. We'll just show this here. Middle chain fatty acids, such as capric and caprylic acid, are able to destroy the waxy cuticle of leaves, allowing them to easily integrate plasma membranes. This reduces the integrity of plasma membranes, in particular thylakoid membranes in the chloroplast. As chlorophyll is released from thylakoids and excited by light, large quantities of reactive oxygen species are produced that attack rubisco and other components responsible for photosynthesis. As plasma membranes fail, cell death again occurs through desiccation. Organic herbicides mainly pose a hazard when being mixed and applying by hand due to their acidic nature. Several constituents of essential oils have the potential to be acutely toxic through a single encounter. However, the amount of herbicide that must be ingested or in contact with the skin is very high. For instance, someone would need to come into contact with 25 gallons of Weed Zap to have a fatal dermal toxicity. This is not to say that you cannot injure yourself by coming into contact with these herbicides. As a backpack sprayer once leaked Weed Zap on me and it had me running for the hose. Luckily, there was soap around to get the oily substance off my skin and stop the burning. Because many organic insecticides share active ingredients with organic registered herbicides, just at a much lower concentration, you can expect these herbicides to be toxic to non-target organisms like pollinators and other beneficial insects during application. Due to their high volatility and short half-life, organic herbicides are not expected to leave toxic residues. However, we are beginning a new greenhouse study to look at organic registered herbicides' potential to change soil pH and affect germination of newly planted seeds. At the moment, organic registered herbicides are being used as broad-spectrum post-emergent herbicides. However, research shows their components have the ability to negatively affect germination of both weed and crop seeds in lab settings. Recent research and our experience in the field also suggests that these herbicides may also be more selective than we had originally thought. The high level of complexity of essential oil components, along with several modes of action by organic registered herbicides, reduce the chances of weeds gaining resistance and making organic registered herbicides prime candidates to be used in resistant weeds in conventional fields. this moment, I'd like to switch gears and share with you some of the results from an ongoing 5-year study at the Eggert Family Organic Farm located at WSU Pullman campus. Before which we'll show you a quick time-lapse photo of what these herbicides do to dandelion weeds.
I don't think it's going to work.
Well, it looks a little different than this, I promise, but we'll keep moving for time's sake. So our study took place in a young, high-density apple orchard infested with field bindweed and Canada thistle. Here's an example of the field bindweed problem when the study began. Next is an example of the Canada thistle that had nearly taken over this entire row. As you can see in the background, different rows had varying levels of weed pressure, both in weed type and amount of weeds present. We tested 4 OMRI registered herbicides, each with a different active ingredient that I've already introduced to you. 2 of these were essential oils, and 2 of them were fatty acids. 2 of these herbicides had newer active ingredients that were not as well researched as the older active ingredients. These herbicides were compared to a hand-weeded plot and a do-nothing control that was weed whacked once a year to prevent seed set. Herbicide effectiveness was observed at 3 different times: 1 hour, 1 day, and 3 days after herbicides were sprayed. In 2018, we added another orchard to the study, a conventionally managed semi-dwarf Fiji apple block in a Tukey orchard also located in Pullman. Overall, we not only discovered that the newly active ingredients outperformed the older, more thoroughly researched active ingredients, but their efficacy was similar to hand weeding and removing weed cover. That hand weeded plots are shown here in the next slide, up at the very top. The next slide shows that this was consistent at each site and every time herbicides were applied. We also saw that effectiveness of the herbicides peaked during the hottest time of the year, and again just before the frost. Now, this slide here shows both Eggert and Tukey orchard at each application time throughout 2017. These next few slides show the plots of each different herbicides look like 1 week after spraying the weeds. First is fatty acid, capric and caprylic acid. Most of these on the ground are dead thistle, which shows the extent of the weed problem as well as the effectiveness of this herbicide. Next is D-limonene. Here, the reddish brown is dead field bindweed, again illustrating the extent of our weed problem and the effectiveness of this herbicide. Vinegar and citric acid did not perform as well as the previous 2 herbicides, as you can see with the green weeds in this next slide. Lastly, the cinnamon clove oil also did not perform as well as the newer active ingredients, capric and caprylic acid and D-limonene. This herbicide was often still actively working up to 1 week after spraying, but was difficult to quantify as weeds had already begun to grow back by then. After repeated applications each year, we found that weed pressure at the beginning of each growing season reduced dramatically compared to the control for the new active ingredients fairly early in the study, and stayed lower than the older active ingredients until recent years, when weed populations shifted to more field bindweed and grass populations, which took longer to establish each year. Now, I know this next slide is going to be a little bit heavy, but what I really want you to take in is that D-limonene, the yellow, was just as effective at preventing grass weeds as hand weeding, the light blue. You can also see that the older herbicides promote more grass growth than the control, which is indicated in the purple. I believe this is because they are able to reduce broadleaf competitors, allowing grass weeds to fill the niche left behind. This is best seen in the vinegar and citric acid plots, as they contain some of the most grass cover of all the plots shown here in the gray. However, in the next slide, you can see that the vinegar and citric acid plots were able to reduce broadleaf weeds to a level similar to that of capric and caprylic acid and D-limonene, shown in the green and yellow. At the beginning of the study in 2017, we sprayed herbicides every 2 weeks. During 2018 and 2019, we matched treatments to growing degree days, attempting to spray weeds that accumulated the same amount of heat units as in 2017. In 2020 and 2021, we reduced the frequency of treatments to once a month in an attempt to reduce the cost of these herbicides. This caused the weeds to grow back more even throughout the growing season. In 2018, we initiated a greenhouse study to test if reduced concentration of capric and caprylic acid was as effective at burning down thistle as it was at full strength as tested in the orchard study. We also compared the newer, more effective herbicides to both glyphosate and a mechanical control. These pictures here show the treatment 3 days after application, and also help to illustrate how effective each of the treatments were against fairly large thistle plants. 2 separate greenhouses were used in this experiment and produced similar results. All of the organic registered herbicides were similarly effective to the mechanical control within 3 to 7 days, while it took glyphosate between 14 and 21 days to reach the same effectiveness. We also weighed thistle rhizomes at the end of the experiment, and we didn't find any difference in the rhizome weight between treatments. A major obstacle to adopting organic registered herbicides is their cost. All treatments except for vinegar were less expensive than paying laborers to hand weed plots. Capric and caprylic acid and D-limonene were most effective at controlling problem weeds. However, capric and caprylic acid was the least expensive treatment at $150 per acre. Because capric and caprylic acid was just as effective at controlling thistle at a lower concentration, its cost per acre can be reduced to $105, beginning to bring it closer to a viable option for farmers. Because of these costs, many organic farmers rely on tillage as a main form of weed management, which can be performed for as little as $16 per acre. Now, we got this number from a study in the Midwest studying large 1,000-acre farms with mechanical tillage. We're very interested to know the economics of tillage as a form of weed management on the Palouse, and we'd love to hear from the rest of you as this presentation is ended to see what some of you guys occur as costs for mechanical tillage. So in summary, capric and caprylic acid and D-limonene were as effective and less expensive than hand weeding at controlling broadleaf weeds. Capric and caprylic acid used at a lower concentration was able to maintain its effectiveness in a greenhouse study, which we believe will translate into the field. And D-limonene was as effective at reducing grass weeds as hand weeding. So where do organic registered herbicides fit into your integrated weed management plan? Well, for starters, like Dr. Carpenter Boggs had previously mentioned, we do not see these herbicides being a standalone weed control, and will need to be used in conjunction with other weed control tactics. However, they do offer minimal soil disturbance and remove weed cover as well as other control measures. They are also less persistent in the environment than synthetic herbicides and may be of use combating resistant weeds. Lastly, by adding more control practices into integrated weed management plans, problem weeds become easier to control. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Carpenter Boggs, who's going to talk to you a little bit about our new research in dryland agriculture on the Palouse.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, so what we're seeing is that these organic herbicides are very effective in the short term, and as one of our cooperators has said, that it's very gratifying to watch them work because things do burn down in just an hour or two. So the video that didn't want to play is actually of this plant. So this is a dandelion. This was sprayed 4 weeks ago, and within 2 hours, the existing biomass really burned down. You can see that it's literally like crispy here, but it was this crispy within a few hours. So within about a week, though, there was some regrowth from it, and that's typically what is seen, is that anything that is physically touched by these materials is really burned down effectively, but there can also be regrowth. So we're interested in just how these materials might be useful in our systems. There are some particular targeted uses that you might consider. So especially in certified organic systems or small scale, we think that they can be really effective in reducing hand weeding. So hand weeding, especially if you're paying someone else for it, is a very expensive route for weed management. And so as expensive as these chemicals are, they're still cheaper than labor. Another targeted use could be fence rows and other non-tillable areas, or just places that you can't get to with other options. Again, especially on with smaller equipment, it might be useful to use these when the soil is too wet to till. So you might be able to walk through or use an ATV or small equipment to spray these chemicals if you need to get in there and it's just too wet to use heavier equipment. And we also think that there is a role for these to play in managing herbicide resistant weeds. Now, this is an area that really has not been studied much. It's something that we're excited to try out and see other people try. But as Aaron showed, there are many modes of action here, and they are different than the existing chemistries. There have also been some questions about whether these organic herbicides might be used for a burn down of harvested crops. So for instance, chickpeas that are continuing to grow and they need to be harvested. That's another aspect that we're going to be trying out, and we would love for other growers to help us try out. There are also ways that these chemicals might be synergistic with other management techniques. So for instance, synergizing these organic herbicides with a more cultural control, being a competitive crop or a strong canopying crop, it still can be useful to use and may still be useful to use an organic herbicide in between those rows or early on. In a fruit or vegetable system where you're using mulch, it may be useful to spray these chemicals before applying the mulch so that things don't come up underneath the mulch, or using on the side of mulch where you have weed escape. And we're also interested in finding producers who are using a weed it or something similar that can reduce the amount of herbicide used on large acreages. As has been stated, these chemicals are pretty expensive, but if you're using something like a weed it that can dramatically reduce the amount of active ingredient that is used per acre, you know, it's going to dramatically reduce the cost and probably bring these down to a reasonable cost per acre, even in large acreage. So our current project, we're doing some relatively small scale trials at a couple of cooperator fields. And we're combining relatively new varieties of peas with these organic herbicides. So this is getting at the potential synergy effect. So we're using 3 different varieties of winter peas that have different growth styles, but are all pretty early to canopy. And of course, that canopying can give a lot of competition to weeds. But the organic herbicides are then being used immediately after seeding and between rows early on in growth to try to synergize that weed management. So we're planting 3 varieties of winter peas and 1 of spring pea as a comparison. And then within each of those, we're using a negative control, so not otherwise managed, mechanical control, which is wheel hoe or you know, small scale mechanical means, and then 2 of the chemicals, the caprylic acid and limonene. So we are hopeful. Of course, we started this last year, which was a humbling year for many of us. And didn't see the kinds of growth that we wanted. But we are hoping that together, the competition from these new winter peas and a little bit of burn down from these organic herbicides might make it more feasible to transition our systems into an organic cycle. We are looking for producers who are interested in this topic of maybe combining winter peas and organic herbicides, and also just other producers who are interested in using the organic herbicides. We're very interested to see different ways that they might work into the local systems. So if you are interested, please do let me know about that, and we'll see if we can work you into our trials. I'm going to stop sharing.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Lynne, Dr. Carpenter Boggs, excuse me, and Erin. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and sharing that research. Very fascinating to see what what's coming out of that research and the potential role that could play on the Palouse. So. Awesome. At this point, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask them yourself. We will monitor the best we can. We did have a few questions that were submitted before the presentation, so maybe I'll just start with one of those and give folks the time to put it into the chat. So one question we received was, what is the drift potential for these chemicals?
They'll burn pretty much any weed that they're going to touch, or any soft plant tissue that they touch. So I think that depends on your sprayer specifications and how small you're having those droplets and what are the conditions of the fields. But I don't see them, because they're volatile, I don't see them volatilizing and then re-injuring plants afterwards, much like some other chemicals can. Right.
It takes a fairly heavy dose to fully burn down a plant. So well, again, like this sad dandelion, it was pretty much sprayed to the point of dripping off, or almost dripping off.
All right, great. In the chat, Pamela put a question in there. Are there plans to research and monetize soil health?
So our new study will be studying some soil parameters such as pH, organic matter, nitrogen content. As for monetizing those, I think it's a little difficult, but I agree that that is important in understanding the true expense of these herbicides. So if you're not damaging some of those soil structures, then you may be able to gain more from your soil than if not.
Nice. Another question here from Iris. How much of the microbial community and fungi below the soil is affected?
That's another great question.
It's supposed to be microbial. Sorry, it's just I typed too fast.
Excuse me. Yeah, sorry. No, I was just reading right off the page. That's why. Thanks, Iris.
Yeah, we believe that microbial communities are probably not affected a whole lot. These are acidic, so I believe that there'll be some damage done to maybe fungus or something that they're touching, but under the soil surface, we actually believe that these products are used as energy sources and are broken down by the microbial community rather quickly.
Yeah, that's right. And again, it takes a pretty heavy dose, and so they're not likely to be very effective below the very surface of the soil. So yeah, we are going to look at pH effects and overall microbial activity at some in layers of the soil. We wouldn't think that those effects would extend very far. And then as Aaron said, you know, these are fatty acids and acids. So yeah, they're carbon sources that should be gobbled up.
Nice.
That's very different from the non-organic herbicides, I think, possibly.
Yeah, well, nature is amazing, and actually some of the herbicides have become food sources because I think microbes got tired of being killed by them, and some bacteria have figured out how to degrade many of the herbicides. You know, that changes the community in a different way.
Aaron, thank you for your comments in here about additional presentations on integrated weed management options. Yeah, we will be looking for some talks for that. I think that is one goal that we've been trying to work on to get a speaker. So thank you for that input. Additional question that Aaron asked here, where are you currently sourcing these herbicides from?
At the beginning of the study, each of the herbicides were donated by their relative companies. As the research began, only capric and caprylic acid was donated until the end of the study. We are purchasing them through distributors at the moment.
Okay, great. And then another question that was submitted before, are there any systematic organic herbicides that are currently in development?
So that's a main problem with organic herbicides, is that they aren't believed to be systemic and translocate into the roots to kill them at this moment right now. I think that's probably $1 million idea if you're able to find an organic herbicide that can systemically translocate. You will have a business that you'll be able to profit off of.
Nice. And then finally, Is WSU have any plans for doing some training courses on this application or education tactics to get out this to producers? I guess we're doing one right now.
We're doing one right now. We're hoping to have field days, both when, you know, our plots are better to look at than things were last year, and, you know, when we're allowed to get together in person. But we're hoping to have field days in the summer.
Fabulous. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lynne Carpenter Boggs and Erin Appleby, for your presentation. You will all be receiving their emails later this morning, so feel free to reach out to them if you have additional questions, or if you may be a producer looking to join their study. We'll share that information with you all. Just to finish off the morning, congratulations to our raffle winner, Deborah Cusick. You have won some PCD swag. I'll be reaching out to you shortly to get your information to send that to you. And then you will all be receiving an invitation to take a post-event survey later this morning. We greatly appreciate your feedback on this event, as it helps shape our future events and gives us some inspiration for future topics. It should only take a minute of your time. So thank you so much for your input. And thank you again to our speakers. Thanks for joining us. We hope you all have a wonderful rest of your morning. So thanks so much.
Thank you.